The late afternoon sun filtered through the window blinds of the Ajayi household in Surulere, casting golden bars across polished tiles. Sarah stood adjusting the curtains with practiced care. Outside, Lagos buzzed with life. Hawkers shouting corn prices, children chasing kites, Danfo drivers honking through narrow streets. Inside was warmth and order. Bernard Ajayi returned from work, his tie loosened, shirt creased from traffic. His face was weary, but his eyes lit up seeing his home. "Daddy!" The twins, Ada and Ifeanyi, ran to hug his legs before he could set his briefcase down. My champions," Bernard chuckled, lifting Ifeanyi while patting Ada's head. "How was school?" "Fine, Daddy. I came second in maths today," Ifeanyi said with small pride. Bernard's eyes widened. "Second? Who beat my son?" "Chinedu," Ifeanyi admitted reluctantly. Bernard bent to his eye level. "Then we clap for Chinedu. Next time you'll take first. That's the spirit of an Ajayi." It was about more than mathematics. It was teaching resilience. From the dining table, Daniel, their firstborn at 20, lifted his head from university textbooks, already serious, always analytical. "Dad, stop filling his head. He needs to study harder." Bernard laughed warmly. "And who filled yours? You're turning into a professor." Sarah watched from the kitchen doorway, still wearing her apron. She smiled, not broadly, but the faint, knowing smile of a woman who had built something real over 25 years. Her catering business grew steadily, but Bernard's construction empire was their backbone. At dinner, Bernard raised his glass of water. To family, the only wealth that never fades. The children cheered softly, clinking juice glasses against his. Sarah's heart warmed, watching their glowing faces in the lamplight. These were the moments she cherished, moments that made Lagos's endless hustle worthwhile. Later, as she cleared plates, Bernard wrapped his arms around her waist. "Thank you, Sarah, for standing by me all these years. Look at what we've built, our children, our home, our life." She leaned into his chest. "It hasn't always been easy, Bernard, but yes, it's worth it." If someone had told her then that this laughter would vanish, that trust would shatter like broken glass, that she would be the architect of that destruction, Sarah would have laughed. Impossible, like the sun rising in the west. But life in Lagos tests foundations. And their test was already waiting, patient and inevitable, beyond the horizon. It started like a drizzle nobody noticed, slight payment delays, minor contract hiccups, nothing alarming. Bernard assured Sarah not to worry. "Government projects are always like this," he said one evening, loosening his tie. "Funds come next week. By the time I finish the Acacia estate, things will turn around." Sarah believed him. Bernard had built his company from nothing. She remembered those early years. 2 men, a pickup truck, a dream. Now 50 workers, millions in contracts, clients who called him by his first name with respect. But weeks became months. The drizzle became a downpour. The government changed leadership. New contractors, men favored by incoming politicians, men with connections Bernard lacked, were awarded his projects. The millions he'd borrowed were already sunk into materials, equipment, worker salaries. Without fresh contracts, cash flow dried up like a well in Harmattan. One evening, Sarah found Bernard sitting in darkness, elbows on knees, hands covering his face, a gesture of complete defeat she'd never seen before. "Bernard?" she asked softly, reaching for the light. He looked up, eyes bloodshot and haunted. "They canceled the Apapa Road project. Just like that. No explanation, no refund. Everything I invested, gone. 20 years of credibility, gone in a day because the new government wants their own men to benefit." Her hand flew to her mouth. The Apapa project was his largest contract ever. It was supposed to sustain them for 2 years, propel them to Lagos's upper echelon. "What about the other contracts?" she asked, though she already saw the answer. Reassigned, he said flatly. Sarah, I don't know if I can survive this one. The weeks that followed were grinding chaos. Workers protested outside his office, demanding unpaid wages. Banks called at odd hours, threatening seizure and court proceedings. Trucks loaded with cement and iron rods stood idle in yards, metal rusting in Lagos rain, monuments to ambition that had overreached. The landlord came one morning, tapping his biro deliberately. Mr. Ajayi, your rent is 6 months in arrears, 1 month to settle or vacate. Sarah felt her world tilt. Her catering savings, money set aside for years to expand her shop, suddenly became necessity. She paid rent, school fees, groceries. At first, willingly. This was her husband, her children's father. But as time dragged and bills kept coming, her heart grew heavier. She no longer saw the strong, confident man she'd married. She saw a broken shadow drowning in shame. One night, sitting with a calculator and bills spread like a map of their sinking ship, Bernard whispered, "Sarah, I'm sorry." She didn't look up. "Sorry doesn't pay NEPA bills, Bernard." The words fell like stones. Bernard closed his eyes, feeling them cut deep. He wanted to remind her of years he'd provided, sacrifices he'd made, but his throat tightened. He had no defense. The truth was too damning. He had nothing left to give. Little by little, their marriage's foundation cracked. Damage came not from outside forces alone, but from silence, unspoken resentment, growing like mold. Slow erosion of respect that poverty brings. Not honest poverty, but devastating poverty of falling from permanent heights. Sarah balanced tomatoes on her head at Mile 12 Market, sun beating mercilessly, sweat stinging her eyes. She bargained fiercely, but prices rose daily, her money stretched thinner. Her friend Funky leaned close. "Ah, Sarah, you've become so strong. If not for you, your house would have collapsed since." It was meant as compliment. Funk's next words pierced deeper. "Honestly, if it were me, I would have left that man by now. A husband that can't provide is like pepperless soup. Of what use?" Sarah said nothing, but those words clung to her heart like second skin, poisoning something pure. At church the next Sunday, whispers found her again. 2 women behind her spoke in voices they thought too quiet, but which reached her clearly. "Have you heard? Sarah's husband's business scattered. She's paying for everything now. After how long they've been married? 25 years, and this is the result? God forbid, bad thing." Sarah's ears burned with shame, not even her own. She felt naked under their judgment. By service's end, she couldn't look Bernard in the eye. Her community's judgment had become her own. At home, cracks widened. Bernard grew quieter, withdrawn, avoiding conversations. He sat in darkness, staring at nothing. Children tried cheering him, but Sarah only saw failure when she looked at him now. And failure, she was learning, was not something she could respect. One rainy afternoon, after delivering jollof rice and fried chicken to a Victoria Island office, Sarah encountered Collins in the lobby. He was tall, smooth-skinned, glistening under fluorescent lights. Everything about him shimmered with ease and confidence, the performance of success. His voice carried easy charm that slipped past defenses like water finding cracks. "Madam, a beg, who cooked this food?" he asked, wiping his mouth, eyes lingering just too long. Sarah turned, adjusting her jewel. "I did. Why?" "My God!" he exclaimed dramatically, holding his chest. "This jollof is not ordinary. This is love in a plate. If you're not careful, I might fall in love with you right here." She laughed despite herself. Months had passed since any man made her feel noticed. Bernard looked at her now with eyes clouded by troubles, as if she were part of the problem. Collins grinned, leaning closer, cologne mixing with food scents. "You know, a beautiful woman like you deserves to be treated like a queen. Lagos men don't know what they have until it's gone." Sarah blushed, waving him off. Go finish your food, a beg. But something stirred inside, a spark she thought extinguished by responsibility and disappointment. Over following weeks, Collins appeared more often, always with thin pretexts neither acknowledged. He stopped by her shop buying snacks, carried coolers to his car, lingered with conversations making her laugh, really laugh, for the first time in years. Queen Sarah, he'd call her, and something in how he said it made her believe it. One day you'll see you deserve more than this suffering. A woman like you should cruise in a Benz, not carry coolers under hot sun like a peddler. Each time, his words sank deeper, mixing with church whispers, Funk's dismissal, her own growing bitterness. She compared Collins, young, attentive, admiring, to Bernard at home, defeated and silent. Sarah found herself standing longer at mirrors before leaving, tying wrappers tighter, applying lipstick untouched for months. She told herself it was innocent, harmless banter. But deep down, she knew, the wall of loyalty built over 25 years was cracking. Collins, with smooth voice and easy smile, slipped through like water through stone. One evening, rain just ended, streets glistening under dim streetlight, Sarah locked her shop after an exhausting day. Collins's horn blared. He leaned casually against a sleek car she'd never seen, picture of casual confidence. "Queen Sarah," he called with a grin, holding promises she wasn't sure she wanted examined. "You'll get sick waiting for Kiki Napep in rain. Enter, let me drop you. It's the least a gentleman can do." Sarah hesitated. Accepting lifts from younger men felt wrong, but tired legs, aching feet, exhaustion with her life's struggle betrayed her hesitation. She entered, inhaling leather and cologne, feeling something shift inside. "You deserve better than hustling under rain," Collins said smoothly while driving. "A queen like you shouldn't be struggling. Men in this city would give their right arm ensuring you never worked another day." Sarah chuckled uneasily. "You and this sweet mouth. Focus on the road, a beg." Inside, her chest warmed. Bernard rarely noticed anymore. Not really. He was consumed by his drowning, unable to see her reaching for help. A week later, Collins appeared with a small velvet box, theatrical gesture designed to make her breath catch. "What is this?" Sarah asked, frowning as her heart raced. "Just open it," he urged softly. Inside lay a delicate gold bracelet catching light like captured sunshine. "Collins, no, this is too much. I can't accept this." Words came automatically, the way women are taught refusing such gifts. But her hands didn't close the box. He leaned closer, voice dropping intimately. "You can, and you will, because you're the only woman who made me feel alive in a long time. Everyone else is pretending. But you're real, Sarah. You're a queen." Her heart skipped. She laughed nervously, trying waving him off, but his eyes lingered unsettlingly. Not with fear, but something more dangerous. Recognition. As if he saw her truly in ways her husband no longer did. That evening, she wore the bracelet home, hiding it under her sleeve when Bernard entered. But as she cooked, she kept glancing at it, gold catching light, reminding her of Collins's words and how his attention made her feel like herself again. Following weeks blurred into dangerous, intoxicating dance. Collins was everywhere, waiting outside her shop, sending playful texts making her smile, complimenting her hair, dress, smile. He called her my queen with such conviction that slowly, imperceptibly, she began believing him. Perhaps she was a queen, and the man at home was simply too broken recognizing it. One night after delivering food, Collins insisted driving her home again. Instead of stopping at her gate, he parked by the lagoon bridge, where city lights reflected on water like fallen stars. The moment felt choreographed, carefully planned. "Sarah," he said softly, hand finding hers in darkness, "why do you stay with a man who has nothing left giving you? You deserve love, joy, someone who sees you, someone appreciating what you are." Sarah's breath caught. She thought of Bernard at home, silent, his shame like a third presence. She thought of children sensing tension, of emptiness replacing laughter, of how her contributions transformed from love gifts into resented obligations. "I can't. I'm married," she whispered, but her hand didn't pull away. Collins leaned closer, cologne thick in air. "And are you happy in that marriage? Tell me truth, Sarah. Look me in eyes and tell me you're happy." She couldn't. Tears coming answered enough. When his lips touched hers, she didn't resist. Not that night, not nights after. What started as stolen kisses turned into hotel rooms, whispered future promises, worlds where she was desired, appreciated, seen. Sarah found herself laughing again, genuinely, dressing better, feeling younger. She began buying him gifts, shirts, shoes, new phone, each purchase small rebellion against her built life. "Baby," Collins cooed one evening, wrapping arms around her, making her feel cherished. "I have big plans, but I need capital. With your support, we'll rise together. Imagine us in Lekki, living large, traveling abroad. A woman like you deserves that." Sarah hesitated briefly before agreeing. For first time in years, she felt alive. She felt wanted. She felt like a queen. But deep in her heart, in places she tried not looking, she knew. She was crossing lines that could never be uncrossed. The Ajayi household no longer carried laughter it once knew. Dinner time, once filled with stories and childhood dramas, became silent ritual performed by people sharing tables. Bernard sat at head, food barely touched, eyes distant, mind somewhere darker. Children whispered, sensing tension hanging like humidity before storms. Sarah sat opposite, bitterness etched like something permanent. Each time she looked at Bernard, she saw only stripped pride, failure, a man no longer worth her loyalty. One humid evening, ceiling fan spinning lazily above, circulating hot air without cooling anything, Sarah slammed a bill onto the table with unnecessary force. "School fees," she said flatly, voice carrying accumulated frustration. "Again. And this time I don't have enough. Daniel complains about being sent away from lectures." Bernard rubbed his temples, gesture becoming habitual, as if holding all failure's weight. "Sarah, I've been talking to a contact about a new project. If things work out—" She cut him off sharply, voice rising. "That's what you've been saying for months. Contacts, projects, promises. Meanwhile, we're drowning. Do you even realize how humiliating it is that I, your wife, am carrying this family while you sit waiting for miracles?" Children froze, eyes darting between parents. "Sarah, please," Bernard said quietly, glancing at them pleading for discretion. "Not in front of the children." But Sarah's voice rose higher, past return. "Why not? Shouldn't they know truth? That their father is no longer the man he once was? That he can't provide anymore? That I had to become this house's man?" Daniel stood abruptly, anger flashing in young eyes. Anger of a son watching his father's unmending. "Mum, that's enough." Sarah turned, lips trembling with force of emotions she couldn't contain. "Don't talk to me like that, Daniel. I'm paying your fees. Without me, you'd be out of school right now." Bernard's face flushed with shame. He wanted defending himself, reminding her of years he'd provided, sacrifices he'd made, love that was their foundation. But words caught in his throat like something physical. He couldn't deny truth. He had nothing left giving. Later that night, after children retreated, Bernard approached Sarah in their bedroom. His voice was small and broken. "Sarah, I know I've failed you, but please be patient with me. I'm trying. I'm working on something, I promise. Just give me a little more time." She turned sharply, voice ice cold. "Patient? Bernard, I'm tired. Tired of carrying you, tired of carrying this house. I married a strong man who could provide, protect his family. I didn't marry a beggar." Words cut like knives, and she knew it speaking them. She saw them land in his chest, but she said them anyway, because her pain demanded outlets. "Is this how you see me now?" Bernard asked, voice barely above whisper. "After 25 years? After everything we've built together?" Sarah's eyes filled with tears, not compassionate tears, but rage and frustration. But her resolve was firm, resentment hardened into immovable things. "Yes," she said, "I can't do this anymore." She reached for her wardrobe, pulling out suitcase appearing from nowhere, as if she'd been planning this moment all along. Perhaps she had, in some mind part she hadn't allowed herself acknowledging. Bernard's hands shook, grabbing her wrist. "Sarah, please," he begged, desperation in his voice she'd never heard. "Don't do this. Think of the children." "I am thinking of them," she snapped, yanking her hand free. "They'll be better off if I'm happy, and I can't be happy here anymore. I can't be happy with a man who has nothing." By morning, Sarah was gone. She left 3 children confused and broken, and a husband so shattered he simply sat in the living room staring at her empty chair, unable processing what happened, unable moving, unable thinking except that his wife had left him and taken their children. Neighbors soon whispered what happened, turning it over in mouths like something delicious. Can you imagine? After 25 years she left him for a younger man, a young boy really. What has this world come to? Bernard walked past silently, their pity stabbing deeper than gossip ever could. He was now a man alone with debts, with children he struggled understanding, with a heart broken not by circumstances, but by the person he trusted most. And Sarah? She was already in Collins's arms, convincing herself she'd chosen freedom, chosen herself, that this was justified and right. Collins's apartment in Leckie was nothing like the modest flat Sarah had shared with Bernard for so many years. Marble tiles were cool beneath her feet. The sparkling chandelier captured and amplified every light drop. The large balcony overlooked the city like kingdoms. All of it dazzled her senses, with promises of lives she'd never imagined having. "Welcome home, Queen," Collins whispered, opening the door, handing her keys, his smile containing promises making her heart race. Sarah smiled, her heart swelling with excitement. For first time in years, she felt beginning a new chapter, one where she wasn't weighed down by bills, debts, husband's endless excuses and failure. Collins poured wine and raised toasts. To us, building empires together. His confidence was intoxicating. He spoke of their future as if already written, as if success was simply time and her money's matters. They clinked glasses. Sarah laughed, sounds ringing bright through apartments, masking guilt tugging faintly at her heart, guilt she was learning ignoring with each passing day. Meanwhile, in Surulere, in small flats suddenly echoing with absences, Bernard sat at dining tables, staring at 3 pairs of eyes. His eldest, Daniel, clenched his fists, his face hardened with anger, directed not only at mothers, but at fathers for not being enough, for not protecting what they'd built. "She left us for that man," Daniel muttered, words heavy with betrayal's weight. Bernard placed hands on his son's shoulders, his voice tired but still gentle. "Don't speak of your mother that way, Daniel. Whatever she's done, she's still your mother." Daniel shook his head, pulling away. "She abandoned us, Dad. You don't abandon your family for money. You don't abandon your children." The younger children, Angela and David, were silent. Angela's tears rolled silently down her cheeks. Quiet tears of children old enough understanding something was terribly wrong, but too young processing it. David simply sat frozen, staring at mother's empty chairs, unable comprehending why she left or when she might come back. Bernard's heart broke into pieces. He would spend years trying reassembling. But he forced steady voices, because his children needed him strong, because they had no one else. "We'll be fine. I'll take care of you. I promise." Deep inside, he knew promises were heavier than anything he'd ever carried. His business was still barely crawling, and every morning bills stared at him like silent judges of his adequacy. Sarah threw herself into relationships with Collins with intensities of someone trying outrunning her consciences. She funded his dreams with monies she no longer felt belonged to her, paid for new SUVs, invested in boutique businesses he wanted starting, even covered rents when he claimed his business partners were delaying funds. Each transaction was another nail in her former life's coffins, another step away from the woman she'd been. "Baby," Collins would say, wrapping arms around her, his voice thick with gratitudes, somehow sounding performative, even when she was drowning in it. "You're the only woman who believes in me. We'll build empires that will make Bernard look like fools." Sarah laughed and believed him, because believing him was easier than confronting what she was actually doing. She felt young again, buying wigs and designer dresses and perfumes smelling like money and possibilities. At parties, people admired her beauties, her confidences, her new men. For once, she was the one being envied instead of pitied. Yet, in her quiet moments, and there were fewer of these as time went on, doubt gnawed at her like mice in walls. These moments usually came at nights, after Collins had gone out, leaving her alone in glittering apartments, beginning feeling less like dreams and more like cages. One evening, while sipping wines on balconies and watching city lights blur in darkness, she received calls from Angela, her teenage daughters. The girls' voices were thin and frightened. "Mummy," Angela's voice cracked, "David is sick. He's been coughing all nights. We don't have monies for hospitals. Daddy says it's just colds, but—" Sarah's chests tightened as if fisted hands had wrapped around her hearts. Without thinking, she said, "Put your fathers on the phones." Bernard's tired voice came on, and hearing it, so worn, so diminished, made her eyes sting. "Don't worry, Sarah. I'll find ways. I always do." "Bernard, let me send some monies." "No," he said firmly, and there was something in his tone suggesting this was the one boundary he would not allow her to cross. "You've made your choices. We'll manage. We'll survive." Lines went dead. Sarah sat frozen on balconies, wines turning sours in her mouths. In backgrounds, Collins's friends were laughing about monies and business deals and the foolishness of poor. She felt the distances between herself and her children growing like chasms, widening with every moment, swallowing everything good she'd ever done. While Sarah dined in restaurants with tablecloths and wine glasses and took weekend trips with Collins to resort towns she'd never imagined visiting, Bernard was washing clothes with Angela, his large hands careful with delicate fabrics. He was cooking meals with David, teaching him the small alchemies of turning humble ingredients into nourishing somethings. He was scraping together monies for Daniel's university fees, working odd jobs, selling items from his office, doing whatever it took keeping his son in schools. Neighbors noticed the transformations, and their whispers changed from pitying to something else's, strange mixtures of respects and sadnesses. "See Bernard," they murmured, "carrying his children like widowers, and they're not even dead. And Sarah? She's flaunting that young boy all over towns like she's won somethings." But Bernard never spoke ill of her. He kept his silences, his pains buried so deeply that even his children couldn't reach it. While he remained silent, his children learned resiliences the hard ways, learning that loves could be steady and quiet, even when unsupported by fortunes or ease. 2 years passed with the strange speeds of time when one is suffering. Sarah had spent millions on Collins, monies that should have been investments, that should have been their shared foundations. At firsts, he had been doting, romantic, attentive in ways making her feel chosen. But slowly, almost imperceptibly, his tones began changing. He was out late at nights, often unreachable. When she asked him where he'd been, he grew impatient, dismissing her concerns with waves of his hands. One evenings, she confronted him as he lounged on sofas, scrolling through his phones, with the casual disinterests of someone who had moved on to something's new. "Collins, where have you been? You didn't come homes last nights." He barely looked up. "Business, babe. Stop acting like my mother's." Sarah's heart sank. Fairy tales were developing cracks, and she could feel it fracturing beneath her feet. At first, she told herself it was nothing. Collins was just busy building their empires. Naturally, he needed being outs, with investors and contacts. It was all for them, for their futures together. But excuses piled up like stones. Nights turned into mornings, without him returning. The once sweet calls of my queens dwindled into curt replies that came fewer and fewer. "Babe, I'll call you backs," became his favorite lines, but he rarely did. Days stretched between communications until Sarah found herself staring at her phones, waiting for messages that never came, checking her emails obsessively for business updates he had promised sharing. One Saturday evening, Sarah prepared jollof rice and fried plantains, Collins's favorite dish, the one he used to praise endlessly. She set the tables with care, lit candles, and positioned everything perfectly, hoping the meals might rekindle somethings of what they had once shared. She changed into dresses she knew he loved, applied makeups carefully, and waited with the desperate hopes of a woman clutching at straws. By 10 p.m., the foods had congealed into something's unappetizing. By midnights, it was cold to the touches. Collins hadn't come home. She called his phones. It rang onces, then switched off immediately. She called agains and agains. Each time the same dead silence greeted her, silences that felt like rejections. She waited by balconies, her arms wrapped around herself, watching the city lights glitter mockingly far below. The nights pressed in around her, and she found herself remembering Bernard, the ways he used to come homes eager to see her, the ways his faces would light up, the ways he had never made her feel invisible. Around 2 a.m., she finally heard his car horns blare out. He stumbled in, reeking of alcohol so strongly she could taste it in the airs between them, his shirt stained with something she didn't want to examine, and a lipstick marks, not her shades, a brighter reds, smudged across his collars like brands. "Collins," Sarah whispered, her voice trembling with somethings between rages and despairs. "Where have you been?" He waved her off dismissively, heading for the bedrooms as if she were merely an inconvenient obstacle in his paths. "Don't start, Sabeg. I'm tired." Sarah's hearts cracked into pieces that would never fit backs together quite right. She had sacrificed everything for this man, her marriages, her children, her reputations, her dignities, and now he was treating her like a burden he had grown tired of carrying. The realization hit her with the forces of a physical blow, and she found herself sinking onto sofas, unable to move, unable to process the magnitudes of what she had done. Collins's requests for monies became heavier, more frequent, more outlandish. "Baby, the boutiques needs new stocks. Send me N2 millions, just small things." "Babe, I found lands we can buy togethers. If you add N5 millions, we can start developings." "Queen, trust me. This business deals will blows. It just needs capitals to get started." Sarah hesitated sometimes, but Collins always knew exactly how to reel her back in. He would hold hers, kiss her foreheads, whisper words designed to manipulate rather than comforts. "Don't you believe in us? Don't you want to see me rises? When I rises, you rises, babies. We're in this togethers." And each times, Sarah would sign another checks, make another transfers. She sold her late mother's jewelries, pieces she had sworn never to sell, pieces that carried the weights of memories and sentiments. She borrowed from friends who began to look at her with some things like pities. She withdrew monies from her catering businesses, until the shop's shelves stood empty, the lights off, the dreams of expansion dead and buried. Still, Collins's business empires never materialized. There were no developments, no buildings, no grand openings. Just excuses that grew thinner and more transparent with each passing weeks. One afternoons at Balogan markets, Sarah ran into Mama Ifeoma, and old friends whose faces registered shocks at Sarah's appearances. The woman had aged wells. Sarah had aged into something's else's, something's worn and hollowed outs. "My sisters, it's been longs," Mama Ifeoma said warmly, pulling her closes. Then her eyes softened with somethings between pities and concerns. "But Sarah, I heard things. They say you left your husbands for a small boy's?" Sarah's throats tightened. "Peoples like to gossips." Mama Ifeoma sighed deeply, the sighs of someone who had seen this stories before, who knew how it ended. "Be carefuls, my sisters. These young men's of nowadays, once they finish chopping your moneys, they vanish like smokes. I've seen it happen too many times. Women's left with nothings but regrets." The words followed Sarah Holmes, echoing in her heads as she watched Collins lounging on sofas, scrolling endlessly on his phones, not even glancing at her when she entered the rooms. For the first time, she felt a twinge of fears. Not fears of Collins, but fears of what she had become, of the paths she had chosen, of the prices she might still have to pay. At nights, guilt gnawed at her like something's alive in her chests. She tried calling Angela's, but her daughter's voices were distant, formals, like she was speaking to strangers. "Mummy, I'm busy's," she would say, "and nothing's more's." The girls had learned to protect themselves by pulling aways. David would respond with cold monosyllables. "Fines," he would says, "and nothing's more's." Even his one-word answers seemed to contain universes of hurts. Only Daniel refused to pick her calls at all. The rejections stung more than she could bear, more than all of Collins's betrayals combined. Her children were slipping away from her, vanishing into distances that seemed to grow wider with each passing days. And Bernard, oh Bernard, he remained silent. He neither begged her to return nor cursed hers. His quiet dignities was a kind of salts in her wounds, a constant reminders that she had not destroyed a bad man's, but a good one's. One evenings, while Collins was out, agains, Sarah went through his drawers while pretending to tidies. She found documents that made her blood run cold. Bank statements, property papers, business contracts. At first, she smiled, thinking her investments were finally bearing fruits, that their empires were being built. But her smiles vanished when she examined them more closely. The properties weren't in both their names, as Collins had promised repeated. They were all in his names alone. Every business she thought they co-owned was listed under Collins's signatures only. Her monies, her contributions, her sacrifices, all of it had been channeled into assets that belonged entirely to him. Her blood ran cold. The apartment itself was in his name alone. That night, when Collins came home, Sarah confronted him. His eyes were cold, calculating. He barely glanced at her before waving dismissively. "What did you expect, Sarah? You betrayed your husband for me? Did you think that made you loyal?" The next morning he was gone. Everything, his clothes, his documents, even the car she'd bought him, vanished. His phone switched off permanently. The boutique she'd financed stood empty. Sarah's world collapsed. Her bank account was depleted. Her catering shop had been abandoned for months. Friends stopped answering her calls. She was alone, homeless, with nothing but the crushing weight of her choices. Months passed in poverty and desperation. She'd lost everything: her marriage, her children, her dignity, her money. The whispers from neighbors followed her through the streets. She left gold for glitter. One afternoon, gaunt and broken, Sarah sat by the roadside in Victoria Island. She didn't recognize herself in the reflection of store windows, hollow-eyed, aged beyond her years. When Bernard walked past, he froze. Memories flooded him: their wedding day, the children being born, the dreams they'd built together. "Bernard," she whispered, tears streaming down her face, "I'm so sorry. I made a terrible mistake. Please let me come home." He looked at her for a long moment. Part of him wanted to embrace her, to ease her suffering, but another part, the part that remembered his children's broken cries, the nights of humiliation, the weight of carrying everything alone, remained firm. "Get up, Sarah," he said quietly. "People are staring." That evening, Bernard sat with his children. His business had grown steadily over the years. He had rebuilt their lives through integrity and persistence. The children had learned that love meant showing up, even when it hurt. "Your mother reached out," he told them. "I've forgiven her. Not for her sake, but for mine. I cannot carry bitterness. But some bridges once burned cannot be rebuilt the same way. I will always be your father. That will never change." Sarah found a small room in Yaba, surviving on odd jobs. She had learned the cruelest lesson of all. Loyalty and honesty are the true foundations of any marriage. Money fades, beauty fades, even passion fades. But trust, once shattered, may never be restored. And that loss was worth infinitely more than all the millions she'd lost to Collins. Subscribe, like, and share this video with your friends and family. See you in the next video.